Hey there. So today I have special guest, author, and Priestess of Avalon, Annah Taylor Phinny. And her people reached out asking if she'd be, would be a good guest for this show. And I read her summary and I was like, yep, absolutely. So,
Mhm.
so welcome, Anna. Thank you for coming here.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
So I know just seeing Avalon and seeing Priestess, it's like, yeah, this is my speed. So I've been feeling really drawn to that. And actually, even just last week, before I started my Reiki clinic, I had mentioned to all of the women present who were the volunteer Reiki masters or Reiki healers that are our masters, even if they aren't technically a master. I was sharing them my vision and my insights. And I said, I think that we were all priestesses of Avalon together another time. And then one of the women, when she was on the table, saw us all in the robe, you know, and she's like,
Ooh,
what was it? Like, what color? And I go, like a dark blue. She's like, that's what it was. That's awesome. So
oh,
there's a
wow. I
connection there.
feel that. I see that as you're saying it. That gives me shivers.
So yeah, so I guess, I'm curious to hear your story and your offerings and all that. So however you want to begin, thank you for coming again.
Oh, amazing. Thank you. Such beautiful alignment. All the sisters of Avalon being called together,
Right.
receiving that from the inner planes, receiving those images and those memories of being in the robes and being together and tending the fire and circling under the moon, all those beautiful images that live in the collective
Hmm.
and within the, imprints of our collective soul memory.
Right.
It's so beautiful to feel how we're being reconnected.
Yeah.
All of us sisters are being reconnected. So that's such a lovely vision.
Yeah.
And
Amazing.
yeah, I I was called to Avalon really from the time of being a young girl. I mean, I remember really being fascinated with stone circles and buying a book with Stonehenge on the cover when I was 13
Hmm.
and like sleeping with it next to my bed and just feeling such a resonance and a connection to the stones and really longing to experience that kind of a landscape. And I went on my spiritual journey. I probably started consciously connecting with the energy of Avalon around 2012 and read The Mists of Avalon. I probably read it a few years before that
Right.
and really felt such a pull to reconnect with the land and first journeyed there in 2014
Nice.
and was just overcome with a sense of being at home,
Hmm.
really feeling the land, the energy of the land singing to me and welcoming me home. And I had incredible visions and dreams, waking dreams, and a lot of just memories coming online from being in the energy field of that landscape. And it was almost like reuniting with a lover. It was
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
such a deep, deep soul connection that left me with that longing to return again and again. And I really feel that I made a vow then that very first time to continue to return. And the energy of Avalon has played such a significant role in my entire journey. The Lady of Avalon, the Lady of the Lake. The
Hmm.
title of my book is Lady of the Lake Rise. That the From the moment I really stepped foot on the Isle of Avalon, my life has completely changed. I mean, and who's to say, obviously that was one of my destiny points, and
Right.
maybe just to my human, my life has completely changed. That was the highest trajectory all along.
Right.
But I I started a priestess training in 2016. So as after I had been there, I continued to return as often as I could, and I was doing research about the sacred sites and reading books and just really immersed in the energy of
Yeah.
all of the magic that exists there, and started a 3-year priestess training in 2016.
Hmm.
And I'll just say about so Glastonbury, England, which at one time was the ancient Isle of Avalon,
Hmm.
is known as the heart chakra of the earth.
Right.
So there are very powerful ley lines that run through and intersect in Glastonbury.
It's been calling me like crazy, and I really want to
Mm.
get there. I just haven't made it happen yet.
Well, you should come on my pilgrimage
How nice. When is that?
this summer,
Oh, yeah.
June 30th to July 10th.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
Know about that. I knew that you did stuff like that. I didn't realize there was one this summer.
Yes, there's one this summer. A few spots left.
Oh, nice.
Yes, and we stay at the Chalice Well, which
Oh,
is
wow.
a beautiful sacred site. And so we have 24-hour private access
Oh
into
my
the well,
gosh.
to the
Wow.
garden, and bathe in the waters. It's just so incredible
Wow.
and sacred and special to be able to
Mhm.
stay there.
Yeah.
And the ley lines run right through
Right.
those gardens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know how far away is Avalon. Like, is it like all in the same, like, because it used to be an island and then, but
Hmm.
they're all like a short ride from each other, the Avalon.
Everything in Avalon is really walking distance. I mean,
Okay.
it's a very kind of concentrated landscape because it
Mhm.
was a small island, and part of my training
Mhm.
was working intensely with the landscape as the living embodiment of the goddess, of the Lady of Avalon.
Wow.
And so we would walk the periphery of the isle. So I'm very familiar with that, with the landscape and the portals and entry points that
Mhm.
allow access
Hmm.
into the higher realms of Avalon. It's sort of like Glastonbury is the physical world reality 3D,
Mhm.
and Avalon is the higher self, so
Okay.
like there's ways that those who have the eyes to see
Right.
can very much access those
That's awesome.
higher realms through communing with the landscape.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what I was going to say about that energy field of the heart, with the
Mhm.
vortex of the ley lines,
Right.
it really creates a field of acceleration.
Mhm.
So it brings things to the surface that have been held in the unconscious. It activates old memories. It accelerates karma. It accelerates healing. It just really amplifies
Mhm.
whatever you're working with or whatever
Mhm.
your soul is desiring to experience. And so, the way that I experienced in my physical world reality in my life profoundly changing was that, I was on a trajectory to get married, and I thought I would have kids, and I thought that I was kind of going on in this different path. And my second year of priestess training, I was diagnosed with breast cancer at
Right.
age 30, 36. And I realized that, or I came to understand through my spiritual work and having a background in spiritual psychology, that I was I was being given an opportunity for a profound spiritual initiation
Mhm.
through the communion with the land of Avalon and through the vows that I had made to be a clear vessel, to really fully reclaim my priestess self, that all of the feminine wounds and the wounds of suppression and all of the things that had happened in other priestess lifetimes were coming up in an accelerated way
Hmm.
to be healed and cleared and
Right.
forgiven and released and transmuted in order for me to be that clear vessel. And so they sort of crystallized or catalyzed
Mhm.
as a feminine dis-ease.
Right. Right.
And I approached it through that lens
Mhm.
of doing this deep karmic clearing and feminine healing,
Right.
and really saw that sort of as my priestess training. I was
Yeah.
simultaneously training and working with the land and doing this deep inner healing
Wow.
and moving through this underworld journey, really facing death. And that's what I wrote my book about.
That's amazing. I know, because it's like I always, I'm a Reiki healer, so we always see these things as something that is teaching us or bringing up, and whether it's this lifetime or other lifetimes or whatever. So that's really wild. I mean, it sucks for the physical 3D self to have to go through those things, but when you see it through that higher perspective, it definitely makes it a different experience.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I mean, seeing it through the higher perspective is really the medicine. It's like what allows us to to
Mhm.
move through it and know that it's of service to our evolution,
Right.
while it's necessary to still honor the human and the
Mhm.
pain and do the
Mhm.
shadow work, and not bypass all of that.
Right. Right. Do you do any kind of healing work, like hands-on healing, or are you an intuitive that you give messages to people, or is it just like your way of life that you're just taking this approach on things? Like, curious.
I do healing work, yes, and it sort of evolved over the years. I mean, as it does with all of us
Right.
who do healing work. But I offer intuitive healing. I really work with the Lady of Avalon and the energies of Avalon to to help others navigate healing their feminine
Mhm.
wounds,
Right.
that traumas in those specific
Mhm.
experiences. So a lot of a lot of people who have sort of those priestess wounds
Mhm.
of feeling their power was taken away, suppressed, that they were ostracized, they don't feel safe. A lot of those collective
Mhm.
priestess wounds, witch wounds.
Right.
I, as I said, have a background in spiritual psychology, so I sort of fuse spiritual psychology, intuition, priestess arts, and and work with clients in whatever way sort of comes forward in the
Right.
moment.
Because like I've been diving deep into the divine feminine and just learning more about all that stuff. So it's like it comes into conversation often enough. I don't do a lot of teaching on it, but like I've been trying to like put all the pieces together of the things I've learned. And I still don't feel like I have it fully like cinched. But the Glastonbury, like, wasn't that the first site where like Joseph of Aramaic, I can't say
Arathea.
Arimathea. I'm like, but like, where wasn't that a connection with like the original, like Mary Magdalene or like things like that,
Yes,
Glastonbury? So can you speak to that at all? Like,
yes, yes.
okay.
There's beautiful, I mean, that's one of the most incredible things about Glastonbury. There are so many intersecting paths,
Mm-hmm.
so many myths from
Mm-hmm.
many different traditions that surround the Isle, and they all coexist with harmony and love and
Mm-hmm.
appreciation. Like you won't find anyone there who says, "Oh, this is right and that's wrong," or "My path is true and yours isn't." There's such a beautiful ascended perspective
Mm-hmm.
around all of them coexisting and being true and honored.
Right.
And so, excuse me, I'm just going to have a sip of water. The story of Joseph of Arimathea, who was Jesus's uncle,
Mm-hmm.
is that after the crucifixion, he received a vision of the coastline of Cornwall,
Mm-hmm.
excuse me, of England, southern England, southwest England, and he knew that he needed to travel there, and so he gathered some of the apostles, including Mary Magdalene, to travel up to England. And when they recognized the rocky landscape, they started journeying inland
Mm-hmm.
until they arrived in what is now Glastonbury. And that he approached, so the pilgrim's path, there's an ancient pilgrim's path that when you came to the island, you first arrived at what's now known as Brigid's Mound.
Okay.
And so there's this place of Brigid, and there's sort of like a series of hills that get higher until you
Mm-hmm.
reach Glastonbury Tor. And
Right.
they sort of look like the back of a dragon. And the
Mm-hmm.
dragon, the energy lines, the ley lines are also
Mm-hmm.
known as dragon
Dragon
lines. So
lines.
it's a
Yeah.
very magical landscape that looks very much alive.
Mm-hmm.
And so they approached and went up what is now known as Warial Hill. And the story is that Joseph of Arimathea planted his staff in the ground and proclaimed this to be the holiest earth. And a thorn tree, a holy thorn tree, grew where his staff was. And he decided to make that the spot of the first Christian abbey
Hmm.
And so the Abbey, the Glastonbury Abbey, that still exists
Hmm.
in Glastonbury, was started by Joseph of Arimathea
Hmm.
and Magdalene. There are stories about Mary Magdalene working with the priestesses of Avalon, and it is said that they buried the Grail
Hmm.
containing the blood of Christ in what is now known as Chalice Hill. And Chalice Hill, so Chalice Hill and the Tor
Hmm.
are next to each other, big, beautiful rolling hills.
Hmm.
And the water of the red spring that flows in the Chalice Well comes from deep in the earth beneath Chalice Hill.
Hmm.
And so through the mythology of Joseph of Arimathea, the red spring is tinged red because of the blood of Christ, because the grail is buried in the hill.
Right, right. It's so cool. And like, so like I said, I haven't like quite figured it all out and like where I don't feel like I can teach it yet because I still need to like deeply understand everything.
Mm-hmm.
So like the Avalon, that whole like the Avalon priestesses, like when did that happen then? If they were the first to kind of get there back in 0 or 30,
Right, exactly.
whatever. Yeah. How did that evolve?
I think that the Avalon priestesses
Because
predated
they were
that
druid earth
time.
worshiping people, probably, right? So,
Exactly.
yeah.
A lot of those, a lot of those, um, something about Avalon that is very magical
Hmm.
and makes it different to work within as a priestess tradition
Hmm.
is that so much of it is held in the other realms.
Hmm.
Like it's beyond the veil. The
Hmm.
mists of Avalon are known that one of the stories of the mists are that one must approach Avalon with a pure heart,
Hmm.
with a pure intent in order for the mists to part and to
Okay.
gain access to the Holy Isle.
Right.
And so I feel, actually, I'll say one more thing about that. Um, the Lake of Avalon was known to be glassy like a mirror, and it was called often the Isle of Glass.
Hmm.
And the ancient Welsh name is Ynys Wytrin, which means Isle of Glass.
Hmm.
And so the name Glastonbury came from the Isle of
Oh,
Glass.
cool.
And so the lake, the surface of the lake that was reflective like a mirror
Hmm.
or a piece of glass, was said to show you looking into the mirror of the lake showed you your true reflection
Hmm.
and would show you things that
Right.
were hidden, were
Hmm.
hidden underneath the veils of your, between your conscious and unconscious self. So when you looked into the lake with a pure heart, you could travel to the Isle of Avalon,
Okay.
and the mists would part. And the mists, there's so many metaphors that the mists represent, like
Right.
the veil that separate us from our divine self or our
Hmm.
conditioning. There's so many things that the veils can be, the veils
Hmm.
between our human self and spirit.
Hmm.
And so something that's so beautiful about the Avalon tradition is that it very much works with that energy of that which is behind the realm of the seen
Hmm.
and really accessing that which is beyond.
Hmm.
So it's a very ethereal tradition in that way, whereas perhaps like in an Egyptian priestess tradition, there's a lot more preserved knowledge that one can find and research
Right.
and access that with when working with the Avalon
You're on
tradition,
your
it's sort
own.
of like, yeah, you're sort of like pulling from beyond the
Yeah, the
mists.
ethers. Yeah.
And it's very beautiful because there are so many of us,
Hmm.
just as you shared in the beginning, who
Yeah.
have these incredible visions
Right.
of that are the same, or we
Hmm.
have these overlapping memories, and so we're kind of like pulling the threads together
Hmm.
and reweaving it in the present.
That's awesome. So this is what you teach in your course, or what does your course focus on?
Yes, so my course is called The Lady's Mirror,
Hmm.
and it is all about everything that I just shared about the Lake of Avalon. So
Hmm.
working with the Lady of the Lake
Hmm.
and her different elemental faces
Hmm.
to reveal, your true reflection and to really embody your sovereign priestess self. So it's a fusion of spiritual psychology and priestess arts
Mhm.
and tools and meditations to work with the lake of, so the the shimmering lake. So I'll go through the elements that
Yeah.
it starts. So the way that I received it um, was through the communion with the land and working with the land, and kind of there's a small body of water, like a, they call them marines, this water that kind of, the way that they've changed the landscape over time so that it's no longer an island. There's like water that is drained out, and then there's sort of like a stream, a river around what once was the periphery of the isle.
Mhm.
And so if you sit at certain locations, you can see the water
Mhm.
on where there once was the edge of the lake.
Mhm.
And so I've sat in those places a lot and sort of been able to see what the island was like
Mhm.
while sitting on the shores,
Right.
and at least in physical world reality. And so I have sort of tracked like what the water, what the lake of Avalon, what the medicine is at different times of day.
Mhm.
So through the elemental faces, starting with the dark lake is the lake at night. And so if we're sitting with the dark lake, that's connecting us with our shadow self or our unconscious. And so that's one of the modules of the program, is like working with the dark lake and all these different tools to work with that level of consciousness.
Mhm.
Then the dawn of the day is the misty lake, the mirror of air, that
Mhm.
connects us with our mind, our thoughts, our beliefs, our communication. So then there's a whole module around connecting with that level of consciousness, and each one has rituals and practices and meditations and
Mhm.
journal prompts. And then the midday, the highest point of the sun, is the shimmering lake. So
Mhm.
the mirror of fire, and connecting with our will, our creativity, our desire, our passion. And then the aquamarine lake is the lake at dusk.
Mhm.
That's our emotional body, our
Mhm.
intuition. And then the crystalline lake is spirit, our connection to our higher self, our guides. And that's the stars, the stars being reflected on the
Oh,
lake.
cool. Yeah.
So that's how the course is broken down into modules in that way.
Nice. And do you do any work with any goddesses or I mean, I know we talked about Bridget before we hit record.
Yes. Yes. I mean, just in my life, do I work with
Or just
Bridget?
yeah, I guess, whatever, however you want to answer it.
Yeah. Oh gosh, Bridget is such a special sacred goddess to me.
Mhm.
And yes, I do work with many goddesses, and I think sort of the primary goddesses that I work with are Bridget, the
Mhm.
Lady of Avalon,
Mhm.
and the Lady of the Lake. And Bridget is really the goddess that called me to the British Isles,
Okay.
to do work with that land. I started working with her, gosh, I can't even remember, 15 years ago. But I've been on pilgrimage
Mhm.
to all of her sacred sites in Ireland.
Oh, nice.
And oh my gosh, I mean, visiting Bridget's, the site of her ancient fire temple in
Mhm.
Kildare, Ireland, was one of the most profound psychic experiences I've had. So I'll share this because
Yeah,
I know
please do.
I know that
Mhm.
you've felt a connection to her fire.
Yeah.
So Bridget is one of the most ancient goddesses on the planet, and her fire was known to have been an eternal flame that was kept alight by 19 priestesses, and they tended her flame for hundreds and hundreds of years. And when I traveled to Kildare, so there's now a church dedicated to Saint Bridget,
Mhm.
because Bridget was such a prominent figure in ancient culture that during the time of the Inquisitions, and when people were
Yeah.
being forced, yes, to
They're like,
convert.
well, we can't beat them
We're
just to join them. We'll make her a
Yeah,
saint. Yeah.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
We can't erase her.
Yeah.
She's so
Yeah.
deeply ingrained
Yeah.
in the life and the ways that even with rituals connected to farming and milking cows and different times of the year, there's so many things connected to Bridget.
Hmm.
So they made her a saint. And there are stories about an actual woman who lived in Ireland named Bridget. There's sort of some intersecting myths.
Right.
And so she became Saint Bridget. And there was a church built on the site of her ancient fire temple that predates the time of Christ.
Hmm.
And there's just sort of now like a little stone configuration marking where the ancient fire temple was. And I knew that for years that I really wanted to make a pilgrimage there.
Hmm.
And when I went, it was 2017. I When we pulled up into the parking lot of the church, I could feel my whole body starting to tremble and
Wow.
shake. It was like the really big energy came over me. And having never visited the site before,
Mhm.
my feet just carried me around the church, through the graveyard, all the way to the back to the ancient fire temple site.
Wow.
And as I started approaching it, I started crying. And then the cries sort of became sobs. And before I knew it, I was heaving
Yeah.
and crying on the earth. And there was a human element of me that was like, oh my God, there are people who can see me. What am I doing? But it was so uncontrollable.
Right.
It really took over me. And I felt this deep sadness. And as I lay there, I heard the most beautiful voice, as clear as anything, the most beautiful feminine voice say, my daughter, do
Oh,
not,
I'm
do
already covered in
not,
chills.
my daughter, do not feel defeated. The flame is eternal.
Wow. That's amazing.
Oh, I know. Yes, and that was such a sacred,
Wow.
special experience.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's too cool.
Mm.
So
I
yeah,
have a
now I'm like,
beau- I know. I have a beautiful friend in Ireland, and we talk often about doing some sort of a Bridget pilgrimage.
oh nice.
Offer that at some
Yeah.
point.
Yeah. I
Mhm.
know. I'm like, that's the next place I want to travel to is Ireland and Glastonbury and all of that. So it's like,
Mhm.
I don't know if it would have to be broken up into more than one trip or not, but it's definitely been like poking me big time.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, there's
And
so
like
much to
just a
explore.
little offshoot like question, the whole like Knights of Templar and all of that, that is that wrapped in there too with Avalon?
Well, not as much with Avalon, but
Uh-huh.
definitely with Mary Magdalene
Mm-hmm.
and really protecting
Or
Mary as
teaching. Yeah.
her teachings and her body as
Okay.
being the bearer of the grail, her womb being the grail
Yeah.
and protecting her.
Right. That didn't go up that far, like geographically. It wasn't up that way.
I you know
No,
I
like I said, I'm
it's
trying to
hard to
learn it
say.
all.
It's hard to say because
Yeah.
a lot of those teachings were sort of encoded in
Hmm.
structures and
Hmm.
temples. And I
Right.
mean, I know that there's in Scotland, there's um oh gosh, the Roslin Chapel.
Oh yeah, yeah. With the picture of the two of the stained glass of
The Roslin
Jesus and
Chapel
Mary.
is very much a Knights Templar, a sacred Knights Templar site. So it definitely did move through there.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
That's so great. And then your book goes into the details of your journey with breast cancer and your ascension or your exploration with everything that came with that.
Yes, yes. And actually, well, speaking of working with goddesses, I really was working with Inanna, the
Oh yeah.
ancient Sumerian goddess,
Mhm.
during that time and her descent into the underworld, the story of her descent into the underworld,
Mhm.
and really resonating with that through my own underworld journey.
Yeah.
So my book actually parallels my journey of descent with Inanna's. So
Oh
Inanna's
cool.
my underworld guide as I move through the story. And so the first half of the book is the descent,
Hmm.
and chapter is one of the gateways of the underworld that I walked through and what I was stripped of.
Hmm.
The second half of the book is the ascent, and so then the 7 chapters are then about what I reclaimed as I ascended, and it's not told in chronological order. It's very much spiraling and ebbing, flowing, and
Hmm.
coexisting in multi dimensions, as
Right.
that's really the feminine journey. That's the
Totally.
feminine healing journey.
That's cool. The spiral and yeah, it's not a straight line. It's not linear.
Exactly.
That's
Exactly.
awesome. Is there anything else you want to share? Any other cool stories or experiences that are worth mentioning? Or, I mean, I'm sure you got 1,000, but like what pop to mind or otherwise, I just
Mm.
appreciate you sharing your time.
Oh, thank you. It's been so lovely. I yeah, I think that I would just encourage anyone who is going through any kind of healing of trauma or hardship or dis-ease or any kind of grief or suffering to or on the priestess path, moving through their own feminine healing journey in any capacity,
Hmm.
to please reach out to my and pick up my book,
Right.
because it is it is really there to be of service
Mhm.
to that awakening. And
Yeah,
it's on Audible. I narrated it on Audible, and there are meditations, and it's something that I'm so excited to share.
that's exciting. Congratulations on accomplishing all that.
Thank you.
And if people wanted to find you, how can they like locate you? What's your like Instagram handle and all that stuff? Website?
My Instagram is avalon.calling,
Okay.
and my website is also avaloncalling.co.
Hmm.
And the Ladies Mirror online course is on my website.
Hmm.
It's also in my Instagram link tree.
Hmm.
And my book is on Amazon. And it's also on Audible. It's on all the platforms.
Great. That's great. Well, I'm so glad that we crossed paths and thank you for sharing your story. And
I am
yeah, I
too.
look forward to continuing to follow you and learn and who knows, maybe even participate in an event. I don't know if I can get away for 2 weeks and do all that, but oh my God, I really feel it. So
I do too. I'm holding that vision of walking the land of Avalon
yeah,
together.
because I'm like, do I really want to take my family there? Because like they're not, it'd be nice to be among a bunch of fellow priestess kind of
Sister.
vibe, totally different than being
Yes.
feeding my
Yes.
sister a hamburger in the middle of it or whatever. So yeah, I appreciate that. So I'll be in touch. Thank
Okay, I
you for
can't
coming on
wait.
here. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Sure.